Also, one of the requirements is I want a scoop that Chris Wallace can't get.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, sure.
On our little station, right in Middle Arkansas, you'll put us on the map. Hi, welcome to another version of the Out of the Norm show. I'm just so glad you're here, and I'm glad that our special guest is here. This is one of the few men in American politics or world international politics that knows the difference between a Telecaster and a Stratocaster.
I do know the difference.
You do?
Yes, absolutely.
And a P-bass.
I know the difference between a P-bass and a J-bass. I own both of them. So I understand a little bit about all that stuff.
Of course, you know who we're talking to today. Of course, he's not only a premier musician and an author and a father and a minister and a great voice for Christian leadership in this country, but he also just happened to have been a presidential contender, and his name still gets bannered around a little bit, and he hangs out with people like Chris Wallace, and Tony Snow was probably a good friend too.
Tony was a great guy. In fact, one of the regrets that I have is that every time Tony and I talked, we talked about music because he was a musician, played flute, but also sax. And he always would talk about, you know, how he'd like to play with our band, Capital Offense. It's playing here in Bull Shoals this weekend. And we never made it happen, just never got to it. And I really regret that because I think it would have been fun. And Tony was a delightful person.
He was an inspiration to all of us in small-time media. He's just somebody that you used as a role model. You have done thousands of speeches in the last 2 years, haven't you?
At least, yeah.
And millions of people. What does it feel like coming from a place where you were in charge of a state like Arkansas and suddenly to be on a world arena? What kind of changes did it do in you?
Well, it was interesting that you go from being well known in your state, where everywhere you go in Arkansas, people know you, and then for the first several months out there on the national stage, you know, nobody knew who Mike Huckabee was. And if you said, oh, he's the governor of Arkansas, the governor, what? Where's Arkansas? So you had to kind of work on that. People knew Bill Clinton, and they kind of had some reference point of Arkansas. But it really is starting from obscurity. But I'll tell you this, the interesting thing, and I've told some national reporters, and they were surprised to hear me say it, but it's true. Arkansas politics was much tougher and rougher than anything I experienced out there on the national stage. Being a Republican in this state is still sort of, you know, tough sledding. And I think that what I went through, you know, during my time running for office in Arkansas was great preparation for the run for the White House, because, you know, I kept thinking, okay, it's going to get really, really nasty. It's really going to get tough. And I'd go through it, and I'm thinking, it was rougher than that when I was running in Arkansas. So it was great preparation, and I think it maybe explains how Bill Clinton was able to sort of tough it out on the national stage. I think for me, I experienced much the same.
Well, he had it easier because he was a Democrat in this.
Oh, a lot easier. Because when I became governor here, people forget that there was 90 of the 100 House members who were Democrat and 31 out of the 35 senators. So I didn't start out with exactly this sense of, oh boy, we're glad he's here. It was anything but that. Right. But we got a lot of things done, and there were an enormous number of Democrats in the state that were willing to work with me, to their credit, not worry about who got credit as much as to make sure that we improved education and rebuilt our roads and did things like Our Kids First and got the car tags made easier. So there's a lot of things I can look back on. Happy that we got them done, but also grateful that it wasn't just because Republicans were in office. It was because there were some good public servants who put the people of Arkansas above themselves.
Did you find the efficient government message that you had in Arkansas and statewide, was it adaptable to a national policy?
Well, it was adaptable. What I'm finding right now is that a lot of the things that I was laughed at saying for a year ago in the presidential campaign, now everybody's talking about. For example, I was talking about energy independence a year ago and saying it was no longer a matter of just economics or environment, it was a matter of national security. I was scoffed at. I said we needed to have an independent form of energy and be energy independent in 10 years. And I was just ha-ha'd off the stage. Now everybody's saying, we've got to make this like the Manhattan Project and get it done. I was also talking about a radical tax reform, not just tinkering with the system, but going to a consumption tax model. I still think that that would be transformational in our economy. You know, I've heard other proposals out there when it comes to things like the infrastructure. I was the first candidate on the presidential trail that said our infrastructure is crumbling, we've got to address it. So there's some satisfaction in that many of the issues that I brought forth, you know, and during the campaign, you know, now getting some traction, even though I'm not necessarily the one bringing them.
Well, you are bringing them, though, because you have the opportunity to meet people and you can express opinion a lot better now than you could from a political arena. One thing I would ask, too, is do you think that the voice of our party, the Republican Party, not just single voice, but there's a generational difference where you're really part of a new generation of leadership as opposed to someone like the Bob Dole and the Reaganites. What's that doing to our party right now?
I think there's the basic principles are still intact, and that's strong conservatism, which means adherence to self-reliance, independence, less government, lower taxes, strong national defense. What is changing in the party is that there's a kind of a growing divide between what I would call the social conservatives and the economic conservatives. All social conservatives that I'm personally aware of are economic conservatives. Not all the economic conservatives are social conservatives.
This is where our pro-choice and those kind of things.
Exactly. And some are more libertarian than they are classic Republican, but they don't know they're libertarian. They don't know they're not really classic Republicans. They think that they're even a purer form, when in fact, if you looked at their political ideology, it is much more libertarian and much less what I would call classic, genuine, authentic, old-fashioned Orthodox Republican. And that's something we're having to work through as a party and decide. But for those of us who are deep down conservatives, both economically and socially, we understand that if you want to change the economy of a country, you can't divorce that from the moral code we live by. The more that we self-govern, the more that we live according to a moral code that says I'm not going to hit you, steal from you, lie to you, cheat you, you know what? I don't have to have a whole lot of government telling me and regulating me. Now, if I start cheating, lying, and hurting people, it will invoke government to restrict and regulate my behavior so I don't hurt somebody. So if we want lower taxes and less government, the quickest way is for us to live in a very civil and moral manner.
Do you think the dialogue, well, let me go back a little bit here. There's several new leaders or new voices. I guess Speaker Gingrich would probably be one of the transitional from the old guard to where we are now. And you and J.C. Watts and Lindsey Graham and that group of leadership, that is a new voice and a new feel to the party, isn't it?
I think that if you look at every one of the people you just mentioned, what you're going to find that is common among us is that we still are very pro-life, pro-traditional marriage. We also are economic conservatism. Again, low taxes, less government, more limited government, and more local government. All of those are elements that are still there. But we also would talk about responsibility for conservation. We're not necessarily global warmists, but we do believe that there ought to be a matter of stewardship, that we ought to take care of our natural resources. I mean, as a governor of Arkansas, the natural state, it became very easy for me to say, look, we have a beautiful state, magnificent rivers and streams and lakes. We don't want them polluted. We don't want them ruined. This is our treasure, and it's a special, precious treasure that if we destroy, we would never be able to get back. So it's not a matter of worshiping the creation. We worship the Creator, but we respect what He has created, and we want to be good stewards, good managers, and responsible caretakers of it.
But we're finding also, especially in this part of Arkansas, I mean, Baxter County, our neighbor, and part of our viewing area is a Republican community, and then you go to Marion and it's traditional Democrat, but yet they still believe in the same points you just talked about.
Yeah.
How can they justify that?
I think a lot of people they're classic conservatives, even if they may not be hardcore Republicans. Now, if you put the philosophies of the modern, today's Democrat Party and the Republican Party on a piece of paper and took the labels off and said, of these principles, which one most reflects you? Most people, not just in Marion or Baxter County, but I think most people in Arkansas would actually look down that list and say, oh, this group. And it would be the Republican principles, because they don't believe in same-sex marriage. Right. They don't think men ought to marry men. They don't think that we ought to give up our Second Amendment rights. They believe that's a precious constitutional right that we all have. They don't believe that we ought to pay higher taxes and that you ought to snuff the life out of small business. I think one of the things that I'm concerned most about in our Republican Party is that we have got to return to being the champion of small business. We, understand big business is fine. I'm happy for anybody to make profit. But when the tax environment and the regulatory environment makes it so difficult for an entrepreneur to start something off his kitchen table and create a business and be successful at it, we're hurting the long-term capacity of America to be strong. And I just believe small business is the economic backbone of the country. Every big business had to start as a small one. And for every part of our future in the economy, we need to have an environment that encourages people to work, be productive, be entrepreneurs, take risks, and know that if those risks work out, they're going to be amply rewarded and not penalized by the very government that in essence beats them up for being successful.
Well, in your book you said it was we were out to bring restore America is your word that you used on your cover. What I saw is we're preservers of what we always had.
Yeah.
We just need to re-articulate it.
And there's two ways to look at it. I think it's been said about our view toward the world and the earth, but I think it's also true about the economy. We're not simply recipients of what our grandfathers did for us. We are also the caretakers for our grandchildren out there in the future. And we need to look at our country and all of its freedoms and its many liberties, not as our grandparents' gift to us, but as our gift to our grandchildren.
Absolutely. Well, of course, the big question, everybody's talking VPs, but I'm not interested in really what you feel other than what direction are we going with it? What kind of person do we need? Is a Lindsey Graham a good choice?
Lindsey's probably too close to Senator McCain, although he would be fine with me. He's pro-life, he is pro-traditional family, and those are important issues.
Right.
I'm going to have a hard time if somebody is selected that doesn't believe in the sanctity of human life or traditional marriage. And I just think that those are cornerstone, foundational issues to our civilization and culture.
Right.
But I think, whoever Senator McCain picks, I hope he picks somebody who can help him in the ticket. But I believe he needs to have somebody who clearly articulates the values that matter to many of us who value human life and believe that's an important issue.
Well, I agree with you 110%. Well, I know we've got a very limited amount of time. I could sit with you for hours because I believe with you and for you and in you in the same way. And I know that our community out there feels the same way. You have a lot of love in this part of the world. And whatever the Lord takes you to, we know that He'll get the glory for it.
Well,
and you'll receive the credit.
Well, I love this state. I love this part of Arkansas. And the toughest part about campaigning for president was being gone from Arkansas about 29 out of 30 days a month. But, it was always great. I'd go all over the country, and there would be volunteers who would come at their own expense from Arkansas to New Hampshire, to South Carolina, to Iowa, to Wisconsin, to Michigan. And I can't tell you what it's like to get off a bus or an airplane, and there are some familiar faces, people that are out there because they want to help you, and it just meant the world. Great. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to be here with us and share this little bit with us here in this little corner of heaven that we live in. And we appreciate you and just want you to know that the only reason God gave us Arkansas is because He's still building heaven. That's right. And this will be a great model for it. It is. Thank you again, sir. Thank you. God bless you. Thank you. We'll be right back with more stuff in just a few minutes, so don't y'all dare go away. There's stories all about you today. Like loving the South and me, just loving you.